What I'd like to do today is give you a bit of background into what the context of the course is, how we went about building the course and what we decided to do within the course, some of the problems that we encountered and how we fixed some of those problems, and give you some examples of assessments as well that we're using and we've had some success with within the course. So if you have any questions, certainly I'm happy for you to interrupt me as we go. So let's get into it. About me, first of all, I have a computing background. I got a computer science degree a while back, which is why then I spent about 6 years in the book industry as both a bookseller and as a sales rep. And then when I got tired of that, I went to work for Centrelink. And yes, that's why I started in the call centre. I ended up in their IT department. And while I was there, I got myself a social science degree as well, which was fun, majoring in psychology. And then I decided, hey, let's be a teacher. So I did my graduate diploma, and in 2007, I started as a teacher. As far as gaming goes, my gaming pedigree goes back to 1983 with the Commodore 64. That was my first game rig. Yep. Was all it was used for really, was gaming and learning how to program in BASIC. So yes, good times, good times. About the school now, Thebden Senior College has got about 1,100 students in the leafy green suburb of Torrensville, near the Torrens River, between the city and the airport. It's got several focuses. One, it's an adult re-entry college, so adults who want to come back and retool, relearn can come along. We also have a new arrivals program, so students from overseas, recent arrivals, refugees, we have them in. We've got a very strong program of English language, science, maths, everything to get them ready for life in Australia. We've also got what we call regular teenage students. They may not have done particularly well at other sites, and so they've come along to us. Because we've got the adult re-entry sort of focus, we're a more relaxed kind of campus. It's more of a university feel than high school feel, so that helps for some of them. And some of them come along because there's subjects that aren't offered at their home schools. So as an example, I also teach classical studies, which is sort of an ancient history, ancient literature course that we do in a twilight class. And I get students from other sites coming along to that, so that's fun as well. And because of all this, it is significantly multicultural school. Students from Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, most countries in Africa are accounted for, and some European, Eastern European students as well, so, and Asian students, and of course Australian students. So that's the school. Now a little bit of background about the South Australian Certificate of Education, or we like to call it the SACE. This is the new SACE. In 2010, they commenced on a revamp of the whole thing, which opened up a few new subjects, and amongst those were the two I was interested in, English pathways predominantly, and maths pathways as well. They were very flexible subjects that weren't quite as prescribed as the English and maths offerings had been before. You were able to tailor a course to the audience that you wanted to look at. And so what we decided we would do is do that and look at games as our focusing area. So to give you a little bit more background, the SACE, this is the breakup of the SACE, we are looking at 20 credits of literacy and 10 credits of numeracy. They are compulsory within the SACE. You have to do those in some capacity to get your certificate of education. You've got to get a C or better, basically, to do that. And then you move on to stage 2, and you've got to do your research project and 60 credits, which is the equivalent of about 3 4-year subjects. You have to get C's in those as well. The other thing there is called a personal learning plan that usually gets taken care of the year before they start their SACE in year 10. And then 90 credits is made up everywhere else. So the PC gaming course was designed to be a completion package for that literacy and numeracy compulsory units. We would look at 2 subjects for the entire year, and they were going to be integrated as well, so you wouldn't actually just on Tuesdays you'll do maths, and on Thursdays you do English. It would be a case of within any lesson, any given lesson, there'd be a bit of maths, a bit of English, and a bit of whatever else we were studying. So what we've got is a full year course. Originally it was just designed to go for the full year, but we decided when we started it that we needed a mid-year entry point and an exit point as well. As students found out about it, they all wanted to enrol for the second semester, so we sort of had to have a nice transition for each of them. So we end up offering 20 credits of English, so the full tote, 10 credits of maths, and not 20 credits of maths because they only needed 10. And so what we decided to do instead was go with 20 credits of the media studies subject that's available at stage 1 in South Australia. So it tied in quite nicely with what we were looking at game-wise, and it meant that students didn't have to do, or I didn't have to do, a full year of maths as well. So why are we doing it? Well, we're doing it mainly because we find that if students are engaged in what they're studying, they've got a better chance of succeeding with their studies. If you take, especially for the cohort that we're looking at, if you took them and put them into a regular English offering and said, okay, now read 1984 and now read King Lear, it's just not going to work for them, and they'll just stop coming to school, which is what had happened in the past. So we decided to make it to make it more engaging. We would use games as their focus, as the text that they were using, and those texts themselves, especially more recently, the games are getting richer in their narrative, in what they actually, the themes that they cover. So it's a more rich area for them to look at than, say, Space Invaders and Tetris, perhaps. We decided that because the new sace offer these study options, that let's make a hash of it, let's give it a go. And we wanted it, I guess, to be more relevant to our students as well. They're all gamers. There isn't a teenager, I think, around who hasn't played some form of game at some point, either on a console, on a computer, on Facebook, on their phone, whatever it is. So they all play games. They all understand where we're coming from when we're talking about games, so let's make it relevant to them. I do have some Asperger and autistic spectrum students in the class as well, and some of them that's their special focus, that games. One of them is a Nintendo fanboy. If it's got anything to do with Nintendo, he's there. And if it hasn't, not so much. So sort of being able to offer him something that he can relate to his special interest. We have got students with interrupted study, again, either for personal reasons or medical reasons, or just didn't gel particularly well with the school they're at originally. We have them coming back in as well. And we have the regular sort of student that's just disengaged with the regular offering. And so we can give them something a bit different to try to help them get across the board to get that compulsory stuff out of the way. So that's why we did it. What we do, the content that we cover, this is just a rough idea. It's a lot of stuff, but it'll give you an idea of the sort of things we do. We look at superheroes and heroes in general. We look at the monomyth, Campbell's Hero of a Thousand Faces. We look at controversies in the game industry and the way games are reported in the media, things like Columbine and Virginia Tech shooting and those sorts of things. We look at game advocacy, and the students actually quite enjoy that, talking about the R18 debate and whether we should have one or whether we shouldn't. We actually had a few students arguing that we shouldn't, which was interesting. We look at writing for games, and we look at the way games are structured as well, compared to other media as well, so books and movies. In maths, we only cover two topics. We look at statistics, because they're going to deal with a lot of those when it comes to some of the other things they look at, and we look at probability and chance as well, mainly because it fits in so nicely with a gaming focus. And in media studies, and some of this ties in with what we look at in English as well, we look at the portrayal of women in games. We look at game violence, of course, and we look at advertising with a bit of a game focus as well. So we look at those three areas. So that's what we actually go through. We don't do this in isolation, but I guess it's not really a focus of this course to prepare them for further study. It's really designed to help them finish their stage 1 compulsories. But having said that, it is possible that if they haven't engaged in English before, they do our subject. It could be a chance for them then to go on to a regular English offering at stage 2. If it sparks that interest again. Likewise with maths, that doesn't preclude them from doing those again at year 12 at a higher level. It also potentially prepares them for that research project that they have to do at stage 2, which is it's designed to be whatever the student's interested in, they research it for a semester and produce a thing, whether that's a report or an actual item or a game in this case potentially. So it gives them that scope as well. There are TAFE and other vet courses offered through RTOs which have a game focus. We're not specifically preparing them for that, but it certainly wouldn't hurt their chances of succeeding in those as well if they've got that game design, game creation drive. Also at university there are some game design courses, but also some of the creative writing courses potentially as well, because it's not exactly the same as script writing, but a lot of what you will do writing for a game is very similar. And so, you know, if they really actually enjoy that, and I do focus on the writing side of things, that, you know, maybe I can see some of my students in the future in the credits of a game or credits of a TV show. That would be good. So that's where they could end up with. So the pros and cons of running this course. I'm going to start with the cons first of all, and I'll go through these in a little bit more depth in later slides. But time is a big one, not just because you've got to play some of these games, and some of them can take a long time, especially if you're no good at them, like I am, some of them. But also actually preparing the course took a long time because it's such a big course with a lot of content in it. It did take a little while for us to do. The knowledge that's required can be a bit tricky because if you haven't played some of these games that the student's going to be talking about, you're behind the 8 ball potentially. We'll talk about that a little bit later. Distractions, obviously games are a distraction. If you don't necessarily want them playing games all the time in the game class, that's a particular issue. And there's also the perception of games being, you know, for kids, or not being particularly, it's not high art, it's not, some people argue it's not art at all. Then you've got the issue of violence in games. People say, well, why should you expose children to violence? So you've got that perception that you have to deal with. That was a reasonably hard sell for me to get past the school board to get the subject approved, but they came around in the end. The pros, well, I've already mentioned it's relevant to the students because they're all games in some way, shape or form. And this actually tends to attract the more, I guess, hardcore gamers, you'd call them. It helps with their attendance. They know that in a given lesson there will be some time to play a game, so there's more chance of them actually attending the subject. It keeps them engaged for the very reason that it's relevant to them. It helps potentially with their success. They still have to do the work, but it's slightly easier. And it's fun, not just for the students, but for me too, which is something that sometimes teachers overlook. Make it fun for yourself too. I'll talk very, very, very quickly about the games that we decided we would use to start with, just to give you an idea of where we were coming from. It's PC games, so personal computer, games that you'll play on your IBM compatible or your Mac computer. I couldn't convince the school to buy me a class pod of PlayStations, unfortunately. That would have been fun. I know. Jeez. I know. Versus, what are you going to do? I picked predominantly RPGs, and that's not rocket-propelled grenades, that's role-playing games. So, and I'll give you some examples of that in a moment. I wanted stuff that offered player choice to get through a given story. So instead of being very linear, I wanted it to branch based on their decisions or the way they behaved in the game. And I wanted a strong story as well. It just didn't have to be, kill all these guys, you win, the end. And I wanted several different genres to be represented as well. So very quickly, and you may or may not know some of these, Deus Ex, which is, when I say an old game, it came out in the mid-90s, futuristic sci-fi type thing. City of Heroes, which is a superhero role-playing game. And you may have noticed we did superheroes as an actual topic, and that was because of this game. And this game appears a bit later on as well, and you'll see why I chose it, mainly because I play it as well. Neverwinter Nights, which is a fantasy role-playing game based on the Dungeons and Dragons pen and paper game. Blade Runner, which is a film tied into the film, a game tied into the film. It's an actual separate plot line. You play another one of the replicant hunters. It's again offers a great choice. Can't get it anymore. You have to find a copy from somewhere. Fallout, which you may have heard of, Fallout 3 is recently released. I think late last year. But it's a post-apocalyptic sci-fi with a lot of scope for choice. Mech Warrior 4, which is a giant robots game, but again it has a branching narrative depending on your choices. Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic, you can either choose to be a good guy or a bad guy as you play through. Bioshock, that was one of our initial choices. We didn't get there in the end, unfortunately, due to multiple reasons. I'll explain those later. And another one we were looking at was Oblivion, which is another fantasy role-playing game style. So those were the choices. We ended up with a lot of them, but not all of them. And we've got even less of them now, and I'll explain why that is as we go. So issues. Yes, issues. Never runs smooth, unfortunately. That's okay. The big issue was game ratings. Bioshock in particular has got a high rating. It's sort of a horror sci-fi type arrangement. And we decided fairly early on that we would not worry about that one in particular. There was also technical reasons as well.
So Matt, does your school would obviously have to have a policy regarding, and that all of this would have to come under that particular policy?
That's exactly
so
right. We're
11s and 12s, so
yes.
that's
it's not too bad as far as the sort of the maturity goes, and with some of those adult re-entry type people in the class. That wasn't an issue. We are a global peace school, a UN global peace school, so focusing on terribly violent games is just not going to be an issue. There was also an issue of, say, for your Call of Duty style World War II or later first-person shooter type game, that we do have students who come from countries where they have been shot at or suffered trauma from the military. So it's not exactly the sort of thing we want to reintroduce in the classroom. So we had to be very careful about what we chose, and that's why a lot of the stuff you saw was either fantasy or science fiction based, because it sort of has that layer of removal as well. And some of the graphics aren't the most cutting edge graphics either, which also helps sort of, I guess, act as a buffer between your real life experience. I haven't had a student from that background in the classroom yet, but the games are available on the computer to other classes, even though the teacher might not want them to play it. And so if they accidentally started it, I don't want them sort of, suffering more trauma in the classroom. So we deal with that sort of on a programming basis. Let's not put classes have some people in that background in that particular room. But yes, game ratings was a fun one. These others I'll go through individually. Cost, the technology, and also classroom management. If you've got 20 students all playing different games, it's a recipe for disaster. So I needed something to help me keep control in the room. Cost. Your average new game costs around the $100 mark. Sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less, depending. It was difficult for us in some instances to justify paying for a class set of the game, especially if it was a game that students might not all participate with. So we had to be very, very careful about what we purchased, and in some cases we only purchased enough to cover the number of students that were going to play that particular game, which is an issue in itself, because then you can't have a standard install on all of the computers either. The other trouble was, of course, that there aren't any game online or bricks and mortar game stores that really are set up to cope with multiple purchases. They all assume you're going to buy the one for you to play at home, and that's it. So that was a challenge as well. And multiple accounts. Some of these games played online, and you have to have an account. I wanted to make sure that the school had control of those accounts, and again, that was something that had never entered their minds, that you would have an account, you'd play the game, that's it, no more. You didn't need one. So those were interesting, and bulk purchasing was also fun as far as the school was concerned. Having to buy multiple account access was just something that they couldn't get their head around either. So that was, yes, very challenging to work out. What we ended up doing instead was we looked for free games. And in fact, I've moved away from a lot of the games that we were looking at, especially now, this semester, or next semester, the one coming. We've got a lot of games that are free to play that we can actually use in the classroom. And to give you some examples, Dungeons and Dragons Online is free to play. It's of these games, you can play them for free for either a certain period, or you can access certain content, but if you want to access all the really cool stuff, you have to start paying for it. But as far as story is concerned, as far as characters are concerned, everything is the same for everybody. So they can still experience the narratives that we're looking for. This is a massively multiplayer online game as well. So they've got access to playing with people from all over the world, which is also something that's a bit different for them to deal with. Likewise, World of Warcraft at the moment offers trials up to a certain level, but is going to be completely free to play with premium content that you can purchase as well in the coming months. There's the Lord of the Rings Online, which offers the same. There's Champions Online, which is another superhero game, which offers a free to play and then premium content. Dark Space, which is only there because it's a science fiction based game. A lot of these other ones are fantasy based ones. That's where you can explore the galaxy. Battlestar Galactica, which is really just a shoot 'em up game, but again, because it's got the TV show hook to it, there's some rich things that we can look at with that. There's a Western based one called Bang Howdy, which is by the same people who do Puzzle Pirates, if you've ever heard of that. That's a very cartoonish game. Everything in the game is based around a puzzle. So if you have a duel with somebody, instead of actually fighting each other with swords, it's like a Tetris-based puzzle. And the better you do means that your opponent is defeated. So it takes away sort of the hardcore violent aspect of it and makes it a little bit more cartoonish. It's quite fun to play too. Very addictive. There's a real Pirates game called Pirates of the Burning Sea, which is also free to play. And then these two, City of Heroes, which I've mentioned earlier, is going to be free to play later this year, and the Lego Universe is also going to be. So there's a lot of scope for looking at games, playing games, which don't actually cost any money. The trouble with some of them is that there's no firm narrative through it, but depending on the choices or the options that the players make, there's different areas of the games that do open, and it's something that I'll explain a bit later. We've gotten away from sort of looking at a particular game and instead looking at a broader topic instead. The other thing you can do is look for what's called abandonware, so games whose publisher doesn't exist anymore, and there are some websites for that. That was actually how I managed to source Blade Runner, because you can't purchase it anymore. There's a website called Good Old Games, and they sell older games at a much reduced price. I think their average price point's about $5.99. Then there's a price point at $9.99, and sometimes up to about $15. But that's a much sort of more economic way, I guess, of tracking down games. They are older games though, and that becomes an issue too. And I'll talk about that in a moment. The other thing you can do, and this is a bit brave, is let the students supply the games. So they're already playing games at home. This is a PC-based game. They all have their PlayStations and their Xboxes and their Wiis and their DSs and their PSPs and whatever else it is that they've got. So let them choose the games they're going to play, and you base your assessments around whatever game it is, and that's what I've tried to do now. Technology-wise, yes, classroom computers. We're pretty lucky. We've got some great computers. We've got Macintosh computers that are running both the Mac operating system and Windows. So we can log into Windows and have the games available. There do tend to be more games available, for the most part, for the Windows platform than Mac, although that's getting better as we go. But they're not gaming computers. They're not designed to game on. So it does make it a bit tricky picking sort of newer games. Plus, also the newer games are expensive. And that also leads to another issue of that I have to pick older games, which are more available and are more likely to run, but then sometimes they don't work particularly well with a new operating system, like Windows 7. And so that can lead to issues as well. So you're sort of caught between not being able to get the new shiny stuff and some of the old stuff doesn't work either. It's whatever you can get away with. So yes, that makes life interesting. There's also networking issues. Most schools aren't set up to let students play games online for a start, because that would be, distracting in a regular classroom. So ports are blocked so that the computers can't actually talk to the internet to play the games. So that's something we had to get around. DRM, familiar with that term? Digital rights management. This was another reason for us not going with BioShock as one of our games. The game itself was only able to be installed on a limited number of computers before you couldn't install it anymore. It was just to stop piracy and people sharing it around. And it also, every time you wanted to play it, had to check in with a base camp, if you like, a server, to say, hey, am I a legitimate copy of this game? Okay, good, you can play. And that caused great issues because our tech guys would want to create an image of a computer and then copy that image to all the different computers. And if that happened, this DRM would say, oh, wait a minute, you're not supposed to be playing me. That computer was the first one that had me installed. And so there were issues with that. And I threw my arms up and said, no, BioShock. Along with the other reason, of course, of being a little bit too fruity as far as the violence was concerned. The other thing you have to do sometimes is look at getting what's called a no CD patch, which is illegal, but a lot of games say you have to have the game disc in the computer to play it, and that's not terribly practical in a classroom sense. Although it could be a reward-based thing, well, here you can have the disc, you can play it now, but we wanted it to be able to be played as we wanted to, rather than having them all locked away and then having to go get them and check them out in the library, whatever else. So that was an issue too. And of course, the Department of Education and Children's Services blocks most websites that are game related because they're game related. And that's obviously a distraction. You should be paying attention to the teacher. So I had a huge list of websites for our tech guys to put into the whitelist filter to say, yes, you can visit these websites. And there's still some pop up that I have to unblock on the fly, which is good fun. So there's that issue as well. And to solve these technical solutions, I'm lucky in that I have got a computing background. But you get to know your IT support stuff.
Oh God.
And
That's a challenge.
That is a challenge. I'm lucky in that I can help them, so I can offer to help and say I can do some of this stuff.
Maybe next week.
But yes, you'll know from your IT support stuff whether you can do it or not. I offered as well to find out how to fix some of the things that we needed to fix, because I game at home and I have to set them up on my computer. If I can set them up online, I can set them up on the ones at school. So that's always fun. Buy them presents. Bribe them if you can, maybe. The other thing to do is to test judiciously. I found that after we started the course, several of the games wouldn't work for various reasons. You have to have write capability to the directory that it lives in, and most of our students don't have write access to our computers where all the programs live because they might break stuff. But that's not something you think of. Likewise, some of the games just didn't work properly without some heavy tweaking. So you test a lot, or you could do that and let the students supply the games again. If they can run it off of external drive, as long as they're able to do that on your computers, then the tech guys don't have to worry about it not working. If it doesn't work, oh well, you have to play at home instead. Or likewise, if they're playing on a PlayStation or Xbox anyway, they can't play it at school because they're not going to bring their PlayStation in, although one student has offered to do that. Good on him. So yes, and that's what I've looked at now as well, is letting them do it. Classroom management, yes. As you can imagine, a game class is a target-rich environment for distractions. There's a lot of distractions that can be had because there's games right there, inches away from me. I'll click on the game. I'm gaming and you're talking about maths and I'm not listening. More than usual. So we have to do something about that. The other issue, of course, is that students come into a gaming class and they figure we can play games all the time. Yay, game, game, game. But that's not obviously the deal. There's still work to be done. There's still content to be covered. So we have to find a happy balance between those things. The other issue you get is that the games that you chose, the students don't like them. This is old. This is from 4 years ago. I'm not playing this. It's garbage. Where's the new stuff? And that could be an issue too. The first thing to get away from the gameplay all the time and to get away from the distractions is some classroom management software. And I'm not a shill. I don't get any sort of incentive for this, but I can recommend iTalk because it's free. That always helps. But it's a piece of software that'll let you do wonderful things like lock computers, individual computers, or all of them if you want students paying attention. You can actually see what's on their screen. You can take control of their computer, which really freaks them out. I love that. Or you can put their screen up onto the main screen, or you can make everybody look at your screen. You have got that. Fantastic. Yeah, I love it. Could not do the course without it because I would go bonkers. Yes, it's a great little program. The other issue, of course, with the gameplay all of the time, apart from locking their computers, so they have to pay attention to you, is maybe not spending the entire time in the PC lab. A lot of the things that you could do surrounding games don't actually require you to be in front of a computer with a game. It can be discussions, it can be watching films, it could be whatever, but get out of the PC lab as well means that you can get away with it. Or you let the students play the games again to make sure that they have that, I'm not playing this is rubbish. I don't think I've successfully managed to have everybody in the room playing the same game at the same time except for once. And that was with City of Heroes, and that was for a specific reason. So, I mean, not all students are the same, they don't have the same interests. Some of them are into your first person shooters, some of them are into your role-playing games, some of them are into racing games, puzzle games, whatever. So there's no point really trying to force them to play a particular game just because you've got that particular point you want to make about it. The other thing that helps me with classroom management is that we make it clear that for these students, for a lot of these students, this is their best chance of getting their compulsory stage 1 units out of the way. If it's either this or it's a regular English classroom, and let's face it, they're not going to enjoy that. So behave yourself, or maybe you won't be in this classroom anymore. I don't tend to use that particularly often. I haven't had to, which is good. But there have been 1 or 2 occasions where students have to be reminded this is your best shot and the most fun you'll have in class, so please don't abuse it. This is something that you might be a bit afraid of, and that is game knowledge. I'm not sure what your gaming background is, but I'm the same. I haven't played every single game in existence. I don't have the time nor the inclination for a lot of them. Yeah. If you haven't played the game, there are other ways of picking up that knowledge. You can look at Wikipedia. Most of the newer games have got an entry on Wikipedia with a plot synopsis, just like a lot of the films have. So you can actually have an idea of what's involved in the game, what the broad story is. There are websites with specific walkthroughs that are available, which will show you if you take this path, this is where you'll end up, or if you go this way, this is where you end up. If you shoot that guy or talk to him or whatever else, this is where the story goes. And for a lot of the games, and World of Warcraft is a great example of this. World of Warcraft is the second biggest wiki in the world after Wikipedia. Yes, it's just insane the amount of detail in the number of articles and the number of words that have been written about World of Warcraft. Other games have got similar ones where you can go to the website, to the wiki, and actually look up specific details about the game. So you can get a rough idea. It's not the same as playing the game, but it will give you a feel for what the student is experiencing, or hopefully. The other thing that is a potential is actually making an assessment out of it. So you're playing this game, tell me about it. And either written or an oral or whatever, you can actually use that as an assessment, especially under our rules of the English pathways in the sace.
Are you going to talk about your assessment?
I certainly am. You can choose games based on your own experience or your own favourite games. That can be a bit problematic, especially when those are older games. City of Heroes is one that I've played and I've enjoyed and I've chosen it to use in class for that reason. One, and two, it's a little bit different. It's a superhero game. And three, it offers some user input to the way it runs. I'll explain that when I get to my assessments. You can also look at staying current and flexible. So LA Noire came out in May, I think it was, and I gave the class the option. I said, would you like to look at some of the examples of the noir genre and how it works and where it's come from and what this game is building on? And they said, sure. So a game class, sitting down watching The Maltese Falcon and The Big Sleep and Chinatown. So yeah, I didn't think I could possibly get a bunch of teenagers to sit and watch a black and white film, but they did. It was great. They enjoyed it and they got a lot out of it, and they could see, you know, where a lot of the content had come from. And the other thing to look at doing instead of focusing on particular games is to use the broad topics. So, you know, I've got superheroes, but if you just did heroes in general, depending on what game they're playing at home or whatever their favourite game is, you can leverage off of that to get an assessment out of them. So sort of letting go control a little bit, but that's one way of getting them across the line. And the other thing is that we don't just look at games. We don't just play games. We look at other game-related issues. And here's a list of things that you can look at as far as games being the focus, but you don't actually have to have a game in front of you to do it. So you can look at other game-related media. There are a lot of docos out there that cover some of this ground, advertising, YouTube videos, whatever. And you can look at these different things, blog posts, whatever else, which actually leads me to, or advertising, which also leads me to other media that you can use instead of just looking at games. I mean, obviously film and TV. Films that have been based on video games, maybe not, and video games that have been based on films, maybe not either, because the quality is not the best for those, for some reason. It's just a universal law, I think. But a lot of games have been based on films or existing book properties as well. I mean, you've got the best example there of Blade Runner, or The Matrix, yeah, absolutely. It's a pity that The Matrix online game doesn't exist anymore, because that would be an excellent tie-in. Yes, but so you've got that option as well. I look more at short stories mainly because I've got a bunch of reluctant readers anyway. Absolutely. And if I give them a book, they'll, what's this? Where do I plug it in? It doesn't fit in my PlayStation. I don't understand. Maybe I should just digitise it and get them to read it on the screen. You can look at other websites. There's games blogs, news blogs that they can look at as well. Game-related music, there's quite a bit out there. There's a few game music radio stations, which is interesting, but you can use that as well. And my favourite, machinima, so actually getting them to produce short films using the footage from the games that they're playing. It's not a particularly great example, but I've got one coming up. So those are the things that we can look at instead of just focusing on games. So you might not actually pick up a controller or play a game in class, but if you're still studying games, you've got that engagement. I mean, I've had students come into the class and they're known for not participating, but I couldn't shut them up about their favourite game. So it's, you know, you've already tapped into something. So it's good to see. Okay, some assessments now.
Oh, yes, sir.
Yes, now for your first assessment.
Yes,
actually,
sir.
this isn't their first assessment. This is a little bit further on. And this is one of the reasons why I chose City of Heroes. I like it, it's fun, it's superheroes, so the violence level is very sort of, you know, abstract. You defeat people, you don't kill them, you know, they go to jail, that sort of thing. So one of the things that we do, a major project, they have to produce a piece of text. So the text that they're producing from City of Heroes is an actual story arc. And I'll give you an example in a minute, but I just want to talk about the other options on here. So they can look at an actual new game. So they can take an existing property, for example, or an idea that they have, and they can flesh that out and say, this is my pitch to a game publisher. This is the game I want to make. And so there's some writing involved in that. Or they could create a machinima as well. So I gave them an open option there, just a short movie. Some of those were good, some of them not so much, but that's okay. they still had a go at doing it. But the story arc in City of Heroes, as an example, and the text is far too small because my resolution was set really, really high, but all that text in that box in the middle there, a student's written that. That's the introduction to the mission that you have to perform. The game gives you a template which you fill in with all of the incidental dialogue, the introductory dialogue, the success, fail dialogue. You get to choose the maps that you're going to use, the enemy groups that you're going to use, the actual mission objective, whether it's to rescue someone or defeat all the enemies or battle a major villain or whatever it is. The students get to pick all of that, and the game handles the rest. So all of the graphics, all of the programming stuff is done by the game itself. So it's just a little battle as I'm talking in the background. So the students were able to do that, and that's the first thing which is really cool. The second thing which is really cool is then they can share that within the game, and anybody can play it and actually offer feedback. And so that's what we actually did as a class. We played everybody who did one, we played their little mission. And that can range from 15 minutes worth of gameplay up to 2.5 hours, depending on how involved they got and how long they decided to make the actual missions within it. So that was very, I guess, they got an immediate response from that. You don't have to know anything about game programming. All you need to be able to do is actually just access type in text, basically, and choose from drop-downs. You could design your own villains and monsters and things as well, but that's only an option if you want to. You can use the pre-existing ones. And as I said, that game is going free later this year. So the option of making your own games, though, won't be a free option. That'll be something that you can purchase, but I'm interested to see what the pricing structure is on that, whether we can afford to do that as a class, instead of having to buy the whole game just for that one little bit. So that's City of Heroes, and that's making the text. So I can assess them based on their knowledge of the superhero genre and how these sort of stories fit together and the sort of missions and the sort of dialogue you expect to see in a comic book for a superhero. I can look at the narrative structure of the story. Does it have a definite beginning, end, and middle? I can do all those things with a text that otherwise I wouldn't be able to do. It's quite nifty. Maths. I had to show you a maths example. It's not my strong point, maths, unfortunately. I can teach statistics, no worries, and charts I'm all right at, but it's not my preferred subject to teach. And I haven't got any whiz-bang video to show you for this one, obviously, because what they can do is a survey of game habits, computer use habits, or general leisure time habits, or they can choose something else. You'll notice that I have a lot of choice in my assessments, and that's again to try and catch as many different style learners as possible. So most of them tend to pick the gaming survey one, so which is good and bad in some instances, in that I can't give the survey to the general population of the school because some of them won't understand what they're talking about because it's very particular, some of the questions they ask, but then that can come back to their evaluation, of the survey that they do later on as well. So that's one of the tasks they do. I have got regular, we don't call them tests anymore under the new sace, they're called timed skills and application tasks, which sounds much better, doesn't it? So they have that sort of thing as well, and then they have got another assessment that they do too. So that's another example of the assessment. And the third example I have is a media studies one, and that is a media production task. So they've actually got to produce some form of media. And again, options. And they can do this with another student, or they can do it by themselves. Most of them actually chose to do it by themselves, which is interesting. They could produce a game trailer for a game that didn't feature any violence in the actual game trailer. So it's an ad for the game, something like Call of Duty or whatever else, but they could not use any violent imagery at all, which made it quite amusing to see what they did. Standing around, talking, not doing much. Some games offered a little bit more scope than others. The other thing that they could have done was a public service announcement based on the game story, so something within the game. or they could come up with an advertising campaign for a game, either an existing game, or was it one of their own creation this time, including all of the things that you would do, except for box art, because that was actually another assessment that I got them all to do at some point as well. Or they could come up with their own idea and pitch it at me, and if it was appropriate, I could use it. So as an example of a public service announcement, this is Mega Man. This young lady's been has a dog chasing after her, and you had two ways of taking care of the dog. You could scare it away, or you could kick it. And my student thought that was not a particularly nice thing to do to the dog, so he suggested that you shouldn't do that. And the Rescue PlayStation Virtual Animals Association, I thought, was quite a nice touch. So yes, a public service announcement for an in-game game. That was actually it's a game based on the Nintendo DS. So he got all of his footage.
Oh dear, okay, so it's an edited piece.
It's just an edited piece. Yeah. So he came up with the idea of that would be the thing. We storyboarded it. And scripted it.
Voiceover, music.
I used the music from the game, except at the end there when he just he went with some dramatic music to get your attention. Yes. So that was quite cute. Assessment example 4 isn't actually an assessment. It's to give you an idea of the sorts of things that we do. And these are sorts of things that you might do in a regular English class anyway. A background story for one of the characters that you played. And a lot of the students already do this. They do this in their head. They come up with a character concept. I get them to answer some questions about it and then massage that into a written piece. Keeping an in-game journal in character, in your character's voice, which is always fun. And as far as the game advocacy goes, this was a good one. Unfortunately, our Attorney General is now John Rao. He hasn't got quite the reputation that Mick Atkinson used to have, who's a very anti-games individual. But they could write a persuasive argument about the benefits of games for the South Australian Attorney General, or they could do a TV interview for the 7:30 report, or they could do a talk for a school assembly as well. So that gives them, again, a little bit of scope to come up with a persuasive piece, not just a creative writing piece as well. Some of the other things that they do in the English side of things is they look at a particular game controversy and they look at both sides, who said what the outcome of that was, and some of those are quite fun. One of my students actually looked at the Sony network hacking attempt, or successful attempt, a few months ago as a particular, looking at how that was actually reported and how that actually worked. And yes, Sony didn't do particularly well with that. But as far as lessons learned in putting this together, and this is the second year we've offered it, so last year was our first year, and we've changed not a lot, but a bit for this year, and that is that one. Let the students pick the games they want to play. Don't try and shoehorn the students into the game that you want them to play necessarily. And in some instances, that might not be an issue because you can't.
I do.
Actually.
I tell them what they're going to watch.
Cool. The other thing is to keep your options open, and options like how you do assessments. I've got a student who, for 4 hours, I could get 4 sentences out of him. I got him on Facebook one night and interviewed him, and I got 600 words out of him because that wasn't writing an essay, that was just chatting, and I was still getting the text that I needed. And yeah, I don't want to make that a habit though because it was a late night. But and be flexible with what you're going to do. I mean, I was going to use games, and then it's just no, it's a waste of time. It's not going to work, or the students aren't actually particularly interested in that game. Let's not belabor the point. Let's move on. Yes, I mean you have to be really, really flexible with this. Really flexible, especially as things arrive on your doorstep. Like, for example, the PlayStation network being hacked. That was a perfect example for me to talk about something. The other thing that would be interesting is to keep an eye on the news and what's happening in the news and relate that to games as much as possible. Or sometimes the news does it for you. There was a bombing at a Russian airport earlier in the year, which they automatically associated with a particular game that had a similar but not the same kind of content in it. So
sometimes the media does the job for you, which is good.
And that the kids bring that content into the classroom. Hi, sir, did you see this?
Exactly, and
Yes.
that's where you find that engagement
Love that.
coming from. They
Love
come,
that.
they walk in and they want to tell me about
Absolutely.
the latest game release, or did you hear about, or
Yeah.
oh my God, look what happened. And yes, it's hard to shut them up
No, it's
sometimes,
great.
which
Relate it
is good.
straight back to what you're doing in the classroom.
Exactly. So, so thank you once again for coming out. If you've got any other questions, let me know. Or if you've got any of the assessments that you want to have a look at, or any other information, or any questions that you think of later, feel free to email me.